Hi folks, Blake here, hope you're doing well. Today I'm going to do another beginner's guitar lesson. This one a kind of extra lesson and it's based on changing your guitar strings. I'm going to show you how to change them, I'm going to talk about why it's important to change them, talk about the different kind of strings that are available, and also I'll show you a difference between playing old strings and playing new strings and what it sounds like. So why do we need to change strings? Well, first of all, it's just a good thing to know. If you're ever playing on stage and a string breaks, for instance, it's pretty awkward if you then don't know how to change it and you're looking at people in the audience thinking, I need to change this, I'm in a bit of a dire situation. So just having the expertise to know how in itself is useful. But if you don't have any string breakages, basically over time what happens is every time we play guitar, sweat and natural oils from our skin basically build up on the guitar strings as well as dirt, and over time this leads to the guitar strings becoming more buzzy, they don't press down as well, they don't sound quite as clear. We can say the intonation is off, meaning that playing the fret won't sound as clear and as close to that note as it would be with fresh strings. And over a really long period of time, so several months or years, what we see as well with some strings especially is they start to oxidize, so the metals start to oxidize and they change colour, and you can see that with some really old strings when you see basically rusting happening. So with that in mind, your next question might be, how often should you change your strings? And in truth, it kind of depends. If you play every day or you do gigs a few times a week, if you sweat a lot, or if you play in a really hot place like a hot country, or you play in lots of bars that are quite humid and smoky and things like that, then you'll notice that the strings deteriorate quicker. Also, if you're quite a heavy strummer or you play with basically light strings, ones with quite small gauges, basically meaning they're really thin, then you'll break strings more often, and so you'll want to change them more often as well from preventing that happening. And especially if you do things which are a lot more testing on the strings, so you do a lot of bending for instance and things like that, that really can strain the strings over time, so you'll want to change them more often. In terms of what materials strings are made of, for acoustic guitar, there are brass strings, so these are about 80% copper, 20% zinc or so. They're very bright sounding, but they lose their brightness quite quickly and go quite dull. There's phosphor bronze, which I like, so these are the ones I like doing. It's not a sponsored post, but I really like D'Addario strings. So these are still bronze, but they're coated in phosphorus essentially, and it means they're less likely to get oxidized, they last a bit longer. And then there's things like silk and steel strings, which are of course different. Okay, so I just spoke about gauges, and what that means is essentially how thick the strings are. For very light gauges, you can go down to about 8/1000ths of an inch, so that would be called 8 gauge. And in terms of in a pack of strings, like this one, the number, so in this case it will say 011, is for the thinnest string, so the high E string, in this case is an 11 gauge string. And the second number on there is for the thickest string, so the bass E string in this case is 52 gauge. But we really, when we're talking about gauge and we say 8 to about 14 is the range from very light to very heavy, we're talking about the high E string. So at 11, these are about medium, they're about in the middle. If you play heavier gauge strings, that's harder for beginners, they're harder to press down, but they'll go out of tune less often. So the heavier sound means that they don't easily change as much in their length, and therefore the frequency that they vibrate at, and therefore the sound you get. But they will give you a bigger sound as well. So if you play a lot of gigs where you're not plugged in and you're doing it acoustically, you might want heavier gauge strings because they're louder naturally. In contrast to that, if you do a lot of fret work, if you play a lot of intricate things on the guitar, or you're a beginner, you might want some light strings because they're easier to manipulate and they're easier to press down, but they're also easier to break. So if you are quite a heavy strummer, you could break them more easily. Finally, there's also some hybrid strings, so in that case you can get a heavier gauge on the bass strings and then a kind of lighter gauge and the higher strings, which means you can do some of the picky stuff, but you can also have some of the more robust bass strings there for you to play as well. Okay, so if you've seen any of my recent videos, you'll know that I've not played this guitar in quite a while. So before I got my Martin, this was my acoustic guitar that I played a lot. and as a result I haven't changed the strings in quite a long time, so I thought I'd change them on this guitar because it'll give you the starkest difference in sound quality. So let's change the strings. You're going to need your guitar, ideally a tuner of some kind, whether that's a headstock one or one through a pedal or one that you can plug in, and something to cut the strings. Alright, so the first thing to do is start with the guitar between your legs and just undo, starting with the bass E string, the tuning peg, to lessen the tension in the string. You'll see the slack starts coming in the string here. And at this point you want to just take your pliers and just cut the string here. Now at this point you'll often notice that here, where the guitar string is attached to the bridge, there'll be some tuning pegs, and you'll simply pull one out and you'll take the guitar string out, and then you can put the peg back in when the new string's there. In this case you can see that it just feeds through the bridge. So I can just push the string here and pull it out through the other side, and that's how I take it out of the guitar, like so. Most acoustic guitars though have these pins which hold the strings in place, so once you've loosened the string up, take the pin out and then the string slides out too, so you see that the pin holds it in place. You can see that on this side it's got a concave face, and so this is where the string goes. So you put the string on this side and push it down to push it in place, like so. Now often a lot of people, when they're changing strings, will tell you to just change one or two at a time. The reason being is you can retain the tension of the other strings, which should in theory keep the guitar more in tune once you've tightened them up to the right tuning. In this case I'm going to take all the strings off, because once all the strings are off, that offers a good point for you to clean your guitar as well. So as I've said, I've not used this guitar in quite a long time. So once you take the strings off, you have the opportunity to clean the fretboard, clean the body of the guitar, and you can use a microfiber cloth and a cleaning agent for that. Make sure you get a cleaning agent that's specifically for guitars. You can find them online or in any good guitar shop. Okay, so once you've done that to all the strings, you'll have your strings off. If you notice at the end of them, they're usually colour coded, or will have something on them that will tell you which string it is, and most string packs actually come with a little kind of direction manual sheet which will say this is for the E string, this is for the B string, and so on, so check that out. And you'll have your guitar which is completely stringless, and at this point we can start cleaning. So take a microfiber cloth, as I've got here, and take a formula which is made specifically for guitar cleaning, so you can use any. In this case I've got a Jim Dunlop one, and just apply a little bit to the cloth and go over your finish of your guitar to take all that dirt and any marks off of it as well, which will be on there as a result of you playing after a while. I should mention as well, if you've got an electroacoustic guitar and the hole for the battery is actually inside the sound hole, as it is with a lot of them, again, when you're changing strings, it might be a good idea to change the battery. Most batteries in guitars last for about 100 hours or so roughly, so if you've done a lot of gigs or you've been playing for about 100 hours roughly while you've been plugged into an amp, then it might be worth changing at this point, because it's easier to do than when you've got all of your strings on as well. When you're doing this as well, really try and get deep into cleaning the fretboard. This is where most of the dirt and sweat and so on from playing will go. Alright, so once you've cleaned your guitar and made any changes you want to make, open your strings up. They usually come in packets of obviously all 6, but they're wrapped in 2s. And there should hopefully be a guide, as there is on this one, to tell you which string colour represents which string on the guitar. Be careful when you unravel them because they flick open. You don't want to get one in your eye as well. Okay. And there they are, wrapped up. Okay, and we're going to start with the thickest string first. So in this case, it's the brass one at the end, and it's the bass E string. So unwrap them Be careful, like I said, not to watch them as they unwind, like that. And then in the case of a bridge like this one, where we don't have any pins, we simply just feed through here and bring it out the other side. Pull that through. So we want to wrap it around the inside like this, and then after we've done a whole loop, we want to put it through the little hole there and make sure it goes on top of the loop that you've already made. So put it through there, pull that through, and tighten it as much as you can. And then we're going to slowly start rotating up here to make the string get slightly tighter. Don't do it too fast, you don't want the string to stretch too quickly. And make sure it gathers up below, like I'm showing you here, so the string's winding and it's not crossing over at all. Leave yourself some space because you don't want to be cut short, but just cut some off so that it's tidied up and you don't stab yourself with it. You want to be just lightly pulling on the string like this to make sure that it's bringing all the slack through as you're tightening up. So this should ensure that it doesn't become brittle and it stretches a little bit before it's in place. And now we can start hearing that sound come through as it gets tighter. And it's at this point you should get your tuner out and start tuning. My advice would be don't tune it all the way up until the note you're looking for, in this case the bass E. Just do it a little bit below that because we've still got to put the other strings on and therefore increase the tension on the neck. Once they're all on, you can then go back through and do that last bit of tightening up. So that's a little bit below, about D sharp, and we'll move on to the next string and do the same thing. Okay, and now at this point, go through each of the strings from the thickest to the thinnest and just bring them up to tune. Alright, so now we're in tune. Here's a little sound comparison so you can compare the two. Thanks very much for watching, folks. That's been how to change your guitar strings on acoustic guitar. If you like it, please leave me a like. If you want to know anything else, please comment. Please share the video. And if you like my stuff, please subscribe and hit the little notification bell. You'll get a notification every time I release a new video. Thanks a lot. Take care of yourself. See you next time.